Hi, Trey.
Hello.
Hey, nice wig.
Yeah. How do you know that's a wig? I
Uh,
had a I had a meeting with my tax guy the other day on Zoom, and that popped up real quickly, and he was like, "What was that?" I was like, "What? What do you mean? I don't know," because it was on my laptop, but this one on my desktop here, I had a different picture, so I thought, "Oh, I better upgrade the picture over here."
Good one. Hey, do you even remember what we talked about last time?
I do actually, but it was a divergence.
Yeah, it was the composition talk, right?
We were yeah, and
Mhm.
actually, I kind of I figured out how to solve my issue, which was kind of interesting. Was that when I was talking about the end of this piece, the section before it needed more form,
Mhm. Mhm.
and I haven't totally sorted it, but I figured out that's what it needs. It was like the end is peeling away from not enough action. So it's like functioning. It's like having to function as a real statement when it should be kind of peeling away and countering from a little more meat. So yeah, there you go. It only took like another 16 hours of diddling about and driving around in the car and listening and making decisions. And it's still not done yet, but at least I found a solution.
Mhm. Yeah.
So what shall we do?
Do we want to continue where we left off the week before, which I think was the end of Quodia?
Yeah.
And like we kind of like skipped a few things, which was
Okay.
the K2.
Yeah.
Um, so maybe start with K2, and then go from there.
Yeah. So trying to think the timeline. Well, I mean, there's not a lot to say about two, but that's where K2 came from, was the duo that Pat and I
Mhm.
um, didn't even set out to do. It was just based on um, rehearsing with Robert and Adrian with Crimson. They 6 o'clock was soup time, and then that was the end of the day.
Mhm.
We would kind of joke sometimes even 4:45 like somebody would start smelling soup, and Pat and I just wanted to keep working at night, so we ended up just recording an improvisation. I think it was rehearsing for the uh, I don't remember which record, The Power to Believe, maybe.
Mhm.
I
Probably. Yeah.
that sounds about right.
Mhm.
And we just did like a 2 hour play through and recorded that, and that's the first release we made. And then it was just a 2 track, and Pat will take anything and make something out of it. So then we ended up recording here
That
in
that wasn't called Chew though, right? That was like
no, that was
Thunderbird or something.
the Thunderbird suite. Robert used to call us the Rhythm Buddies, so we put that on there, and then Pat
Yeah.
decided that sounded a little dorky, so we upgraded to two. And then we actually did make a recording at my place, and I used to share a rehearsal space with Matt Chamberlain, and then the space became available next door, and I took that space. So we kind of, I think when we made that record, we were kind of using Matt's place and my place, or maybe it was just in Matt's place. I can't even remember. Um, which was a pretty small place, but he had it decked out in a crazy way. And then we did a few shows. Maybe we went to Russia. We played a few shows. It's cool. It's a cool thing. It's really free, and Pat can make so much noise that I don't really have to do anything.
Mhm.
And he even still likes to tell the story. Like, I didn't realize it was so much punishment for him that actually I left him on stage in Russia to go backstage to get some uh, sparklers. to bring out and give to the audience. And he was just playing, and he felt a little lonely there. I think I even went out into the audience once in Poland. And then Pat had this idea of like the two, well, actually when we played in, the idea was that the duo, we would also like play with some local musician and improvise. I mean, it was mostly an improvised thing, not a, yeah, like 90% improvised, maybe 5% composed. So I think our first shows might've been in Russia, and we played with this awesome Polish guitar player. And then we did another thing, I can't remember. And then and I don't even, and then Pat's like TU thing is branched off. You have a thing with him where it's but we never played a show as a trio, have we? No. Yeah. I almost wonder if that's too much, but we'll find out someday. So Pat had this idea that we met. Okay, I remember now. We met Chemo because Project 3, so many projects interlocked. Project 3, which was Robert, Pat, and I, played in Austin at South by Southwest, and Kimmo Kojonen, the Finnish accordion player, was the opening act. And Kimmo was like, we got to do something with him. And actually, funny enough, that Project 3 show was, we had already done Project 2 and Project 1, and this was our first Project 3 show. And we were in the middle of playing, and kind of, you know, it was our first night. We didn't really know what we were doing, and everybody was a little uncomfortable. And it was South by Southwest, which is, I can handle it, but Robert can't. It's like way off of his spectrum of chaos. And we're playing, and I looked over at the side of the stage, and Adrian was standing there. And he had said, if you guys ever do a show a year or so ago, I'm going to be there. So he just came over. He came down to South by Southwest and stood there and watched the show. Anyway, we met Chemo.
Hey, was that Anton's, or which place was that? Which venue? Do you remember?
No, it wasn't Anton's. It was, I don't. It was a really small place. And
so you had a full show though, or no, not just like a 45 minutes?
No, it was short because it was Chemo played before us, then we played, and then after us, I think Pat organized the show or something. There was a flamenco guitarist. Yeah, we played at Anton's like a year later, and that's pretty funny because my whole family, my dad rented a school bus and brought my whole family up, and they had just lost their liquor license. So, which could be a problem for my family. I mean, actually, family came in from all over, even from Houston, because I never played in Texas. But my dad drove up a bunch of people. This is a funny story. And Anton didn't have, they weren't allowed to sell liquor. So they just gave it away. So they just had a free open bar at a Project 3 show. And my dad and all of his friends came, and we played 2 sets. And I remember playing the first set thinking, man, these folks of mine, this is tough stuff. This is tough stuff, you know, and we're not holding back. And I thought, well, at least Thrush is coming later, and there'll be a nice ending, and they'll, you know. And in the middle of the break, I went out to talk to some of them, and they were like, oh, that was a great show. And I was like, oh, that's just the first set. And they're like, the first set? Oh my God. So they had to do another set. Yeah, so anyway, we met Chemo, and Pat was trying to arrange. Chemo got arrested that night for peeing on a church in the middle of the night. All good. And then later on, I think it was probably another year or even longer before Pat arranged us to do a 2. Chemo had a group with Somali, a percussionist, so we had a duo, and we had a duo, so we put a show together. And I don't even remember. I think our first show was in Helsinki, and I barely even remember rehearsing for it. We didn't have much material, and
it was called Cluster 2 then, right? Because their duo was called Cluster.
They were Cluster. Yeah. and then we changed it to K2, and it just kind of evolved. Somali was had a small baby and then another baby on the way, and he was also working with Mom
Yeah.
and Jonesy. So he just didn't really want to travel, and so we kind of went down to a trio, yeah, and played a lot. It's a cool thing too, because there's even more form than what Pat and I do on our own, but there's still a lot of freedom. And the accordion and chemo's vibe is, you would never think it would work, but it really works. And it was able, actually, the thing I really liked about it was, aside from the music, we got to go do festivals in Europe that I don't usually get to play, you know, because of chemo. There's this really strange thing, like he's just a European like everybody else, but because he's from Finland and he plays the accordion, we have this like we could play these world music festivals.
Yeah.
And he's like world music, even though, you know, it's so that was really great. Yeah.
You also played that beautiful, what place in Portugal was it called?
Yeah. Sinas, but how do you actually pronounce it?
I have no idea.
Yeah. We played there, and that's a great gig, because you play in that giant castle overlooking the ocean, and it's like a 1 hour set, and there were other great, I mean, the master musicians of Jiu-Jitsu, the Moroccan guys, played before us. There was a Chinese rock band that played after us that was amazing. And the last time we played, there was this band from the Congo, Kanono #1, that just plays in biras through Marshall Stacks and SBTs, and they played on the beach till like 4 a.m. So that's a really cool festival. Yeah.
What's his name? Like, who was booking for you? Was that Page?
Philip, yeah, Philip Page.
Philip Page, right? Like
yeah.
I remember him.
Philip's got a great story. You could probably interview Philip and get some interesting stories. You know, he moved from Texas. He's from Houston to Scandinavia. I think he moved to Scandinavia because he wanted to work with ABBA.
Oh, but you know, there's this famous record shop in Austin that he kind of like was part of at the very beginning.
Yeah, what was that? I can't remember. You know, Austin wasn't really my scene at all, even though I lived in Texas for years. Weirdly, I hardly ever went up there. Yeah, was that Rockadillo, or is that his label?
I know it wasn't Rockadillo, but I've been to that store many times. I can't remember the name right now, but
oh, you mean it's still there? Yeah,
it's still there. Yeah. Well, at least like 3-4 years it was still there.
Yeah. It's a big store. I can't remember either. It's like it's on Amoeba Music level kind of store.
Yeah. It's interesting, right? Like how these people and these scenes and locations, and you know, like where are you from, and you know, you find connections to people from your youth, right? Much later in life. It's fascinating. I spoke with Morgan Ogren last night, and we were also like with him, it's crazy with his Frank Zappa.
Yeah, those stories. That's awesome.
Yeah. So K2, that's sort of like then somewhat petered out, right?
You know, it was never. That was almost like the most like a Navy SEAL military operation project of anything that I did. Like we only made one record in the studio at Pat's down near Pat and at Pat's place in little spurts, but mostly it was like Philip will write us. They want you in Portugal. I can get one other gig. in July. Can you guys do it? We're like, okay, we'll do it. And then we go in and we rehearse the day before, and then we do the show and do the next show, and then we go home. And then we maybe don't see each other for a year. So it's even hard to say that it's petered out, because like every year Philip would say, okay, I got this weird gig, and you guys are going to go to Kazan now in Russia, or you're going to go to somewhere. I got a show in Spain or Poland or whatnot. So it wouldn't surprise me if that happens again. It's just it's a matter. It's kind of a it's such a specialized ask for that project, because Chemo can go do shows just by himself or with one other guy. But when you bring Pat and I in, suddenly, and Chemo likes to have a lighting guy, and we do surround sound, so it's the sound man and so it's like you got to bring 7 of us in to do a show. So I'm not sure what makes people want to have us. I guess they had Chemo too much and they want a little more muscle this year or something. So it could happen again. Yeah.
It's an interesting constellation, that sometimes you get. I mean, this is like, fans sometimes they ask, very nice, like, will there be a DVD of this show? Well, not really understanding, what the foundation, like the financial foundation of things are. And with some musical projects, like in this case, where you have like 3 guys who sort of like also do their own thing, and you get together, and it's not like it's a band in the way that it would be if you were Radiohead, let's say, or something, where right. So it's
the opposite of that.
Yeah, exactly. And then to see it's always, and this may be like one of the things that needs to be said, that financial, as you say, like, it would be great to go out and play as a trio, but like, you're not, you guys are not going to make much. But like, if Kimmo goes out on his own, like, he can make considerable money, and it's much easier to do, and blah blah blah. Like
Absolutely.
And this is really in you could say, in the way of free expression, right? Because maybe you would want to do more shows with with me, let's say, right? But we can't do it because we don't have offers, and even if we had an offer, it just doesn't pay enough for the 2 of us, right?
The best example I have actually of maybe my whole career is with K2, where we would play, and we don't have to talk about the numbers, but we would get paid quite well to go do a festival in Europe. And sometimes, like the CNES festival in Portugal, it was €8 for a ticket. So it's a subsidized show. We even played some outdoor festivals in Spain, free. And we were paid quite well. Then Philip arranged a thing with the Finnish government. Often funds stuff for Chemo, and he arranged a thing with the Finnish government and Finnair and Finn chocolate milk, or who knows, whatever it was, to sponsor a little tour, go to the States. We played South by Southwest again, but as K2. And there were 2 or 3 other Finnish bands. So we were this kind of Finnish little troupe playing a few shows in America. We played South by Southwest. We played in New York City at the Knitting Factory. Chemo got in a fight with the sound man. All good. Maybe in Toronto, something like. We had like 3 or 4 little gigs, and while we were on the road for that, and it, the expenses were covered by these grants and this advertising. We didn't make very much money, but it was doable. We could do it, and you're talking a lot of people. That's like 12 or 13 people. But while we were there, Pat was like, we should do a gig in Chicago. Let's get a gig in Chicago. And we couldn't get a gig in Chicago for more than $500. you know, we couldn't even drive. We couldn't even rent a van and drive to Chicago for $500.
Mm-hmm.
And here we are. And yeah, that's the situation. So it's pretty much why the project will probably never play in the States. Here it's way worse. You know, it's just purely it's purely commercial. You know, what you can sell into story. There's no support structure.
Yeah.
And we don't have those kinds of interesting festivals that you have over in Europe, where things are mixed between jazz musicians and world musicians from all over the place. And yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So part of that was sort of like happening at the same time as Quodia.
Yeah, there was an
I'm pretty sure.
overlap. Yeah. I think Quodia might have gone to even 2008.
That's
Something.
what you said. That's what you said.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So K2 and 2 in there.
Okay, so that's like 2008, 13 years ago, right?
I'm gonna have to look up my bio to see what happened in the last 13 years. I don't even know if I remember.
Yeah. That's exactly, and let's talk about that, because let's find out what you remember.
What do I remember? So 13 years ago,
I mean, you know, like I'm just going to say this, right? So just for me as a friend of yours, and like I would say like our friendship has grown much like later, even like after 2012 or something, right? But I feel like at this point in time in your career, let's say, I would like to ask you more things about your private life in a way. Because just what kind of like the way it feels or looked from the outside back then was that you were sort of like in the process of sort of reinventing yourself after the Crimson, after leaving Crimson,
and also having more things in my life than just music, to be honest.
Yes.
You know, broadening and you know, I never had a home until I moved into this house like 14 years ago. Not really. I mean, I lived places, but
oh, interesting. Yeah, I wasn't aware of that. So
yeah, I mean, I lived places, but I can remember. It's funny, when I was in New York and married at the time. No, not at the time, but with the woman that I got married to. Maybe I was. I can't remember. Don't put this in. I remember living in this loft in New York City when we left and I moved to New Mexico. I'd been in that loft for 5 years, and I realized that's the longest I've ever lived in one spot in my entire life, even as a kid.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
And it's not like we moved around a lot. I wasn't like in a military family, but like every 3 or 4 years, something was changing.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of when I got here and had the responsibility and of having a child and wanting to be with the child, like music had to, the professional side had to balance with life, otherwise it wasn't going to work. And you know, before that, it was kind of fine, right? Like you're just going to go, you're going to get on, you know, you're going to go and not like if anybody stands in your way, you're going to just run them over, but it's like basically, you know, Robert called and wants to do this, I'm there, you know, or, you know, you don't financially, you can't afford to say no to things, but also you're on your way somewhere. And I think kind of when I moved, I mean, it's not the house, but just that the time period of when I moved here, it's like, okay, I'm setting up I didn't really know it at the time, but I'm setting up a kind of a ground base for myself. musically, but also, just life.
Yeah, that's really quite interesting, because I can sort of like feel something like that happening in my life
Now,
now, right?
like
Because of the baby,
since the baby.
Yes, and also obviously COVID plays a big role
Yeah.
in making that process go quicker, I think, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
You
mean, the
see,
thing
like,
about having a baby, as you know, it's like, it's not just that you want to be responsible and make a protective thing. It's also we traveled so much, you want to be there.
yes,
You want to be with them, and you don't really want to miss stuff.
yes, yeah. So like for me, it's well, first of all, I don't really know if I'm gonna go back touring much. I don't know. Um,
Yeah.
but I've spoken with Jessica, and we will. I can go. Like
Right.
we know that I can go, but I will have to see how it turns out for me if
Yeah. I always have. I mean, the you've probably done longer tours than me. Maybe not, because the industry kind of changed, but the longest tour I ever did was with Sylvia and Fred.
Mhm,
And that was like 10 weeks or 9 weeks.
mhm.
I've never done longer than that. And everybody I worked with Crimson, I mean, when I joined Crimson, I was the youngest guy by far. And they were all like, we're going to work, they didn't want to do long tours.
Yeah.
And we actually did some, but there were breaks. But as much as that is awesome, as you know, like when you play 60 shows, man, you get fucking great. And
Yes.
it gets really easy, and there's easy isn't it's exactly the right, you could take that word the wrong way, but it just gets comfortable playing, and
You know that
you can fine tune to like a super great level, and you get more and more in sync after a
you
couple.
you're finally getting the reps that you would get at the gym, right? And you
Right.
get them on tour, right? And that's
Yeah, and you're on
yeah,
stage, and
yeah,
it's like it's a new venue every night, so you're always, you're as much as I miss that, actually really do like this 1 week go bananas, then come home and recover, and get back.
Mhm.
2 weeks 2 weeks is probably it's hard for me to picture wanting to do something longer than that.
Yeah, interesting. I think for
even even
me,
if even if there was tons of money involved, it would be hard for me to.
mhm. No, for me, it's still, I would still say anything up to like 30 shows is what I would enjoy, what I enjoy.
Right, so
And
5 or 6 weeks,
yes, yeah,
you
like,
really get to sink into it.
yeah, I mean, there was one tour in which we did like 42 shows or something. And that was actually like one of my first tours actually was that long. And I was really beat for like 6 months after that. It was like the recovery time was like
Yeah.
3 times as long as the actual
Well,
tour.
that's one of the things you have to learn too, right? Like how to manage your energy and make sure you're replenishing. And yeah.
Like for me actually like recharging after the show, just after the show, so not after the tour. That was the problem at the beginning for me. Like I was not able to, like when like when we take the bow, like and people go, the applause and everything. I think that should have been the moment where I kind of like draw energy back into my body. And for the first couple 3 years of the professional touring I did, I simply didn't know how to do that. And that was kind of like, I guess now looking, in hindsight, that was really, I just wasn't aware that I should
You
have
were getting,
found a way to do that.
so you kind of just got just drained out.
Yes, because
Yeah.
I was only giving and not taking. Like I didn't understand that that was part of the deal, right? That I should also take from the audience. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then it's tricky too, because depending on your and I mean in general, depending on your personality, the post show, I mean, there's the breaking down the gear, probably because you guys didn't have roadies like most of the projects now, but also the hang with the fans at the merch stand, depending on your personality, that can be like Adrian just totally jives on that.
Yes.
And I can, but also it can be, it can just be too many personalities now you're suddenly engaging with after being on stage. And it's really hard to recover from that.
You know, I really acquired amazing skills doing those after show, you know, meetings with fans. Like, for example, like one of the most powerful things I ever learned is that if there's a person where you get a strange vibe, or you feel some sort of like the, you know, this idea of the energy vampire, this kind of thing, right? So what I learned is I make contact first. I actually take a step forward and shake the person's hand or something, right? And that kind of like breaks that spell somehow.
Yeah.
And that was like extremely helpful to learn that. And
it probably turns off the thing that, and we're talking about really negative people. We're not talking. We're not talking about the general, but that action probably turns off their attraction.
Yes, exactly.
The negative attraction, you know, whatever that is, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so like over the years, I've learned to enjoy touring, and yes, like I said, I like, you know, I like playing, say, I would say like the magical number, something like 17, 18 shows, where then things kind of like go downhill. Like I usually start making more mistakes or whatever. I can't focus anymore, or I play breathless, right? And at the same time, I'm in my head, I'm singing the melody of the Firebird Suite, and stuff like that happened to me, right? Like, and but then if you get over that, like then like there's like the supercharged performance, and yeah. So that's, you know, like so that means also that basically after Crimson, you only did like shorter runs, also with the security project, right?
Security project, you know, one-off stuff with Pat stuff. There's a project. I mean, we're talking much later, but this Indian progressive rock thing here. You know, different things. People would bring me in for different things, and it's obviously different when you go into somebody else's project, because you're it's about it's kind of cool. I like it, but it's an extra. It's a different kind of challenge where you have to learn music that's phrased in a way that's not by your choice. You know, so different choices of phrasing, and also the challenge of blending the sound and the instrument, and and it's you know, it's funny. I was going through. We did this little Eddie Jobson birthday celebration with Andre online the other night, and the other day, and Alex Makachek and Marco were there, and I thought, well, I bet I have my UKZ notes. So I went over there and I pulled out, and I have this huge stack of, I don't even know what to do with it, like my session stuff, or like these gigs where like, here's all my notes and my rehearsal notes. And so there are a lot of little things like that, but and I won't be able to remember them all. And session stuff here, you know. Yeah.
Yes.
But as far as playing live, definitely, you know, at the most, one thing a month or once every other month, kind of you know, for a week or and a bit, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the one facet of your work that we haven't talked about yet at all is you did some scoring work, right, as well, like for, I don't know, did you sell your stuff yourself, or were you part of a library? Or
the way that worked, I there was a period pretty intensely, not intensely, but just it was kind of like a beat. It was kind of like a beat career for me, and it goes back pretty far after Crimson, but late '90s, mid '90s, maybe around Crimson. I worked with this TV producer guy who he had started using. He was an ESPN producer, a sports network, and he had started using some of my stuff and some of the California Guitar Trio stuff. And there was an Olympics that they put some of our stuff in, and then an Iron Man something, like pre-recorded stuff. And then Al contacted me to do actually do the music for a specific show. Yeah, it was usually a specific show, and they were essentially documentaries. So I did like probably 20 of them, and it suited me really well. He because it wasn't. It was this kind of scoring where it wasn't to picture. They never had the picture. I never even saw the picture. He would just say, we need some stuff like this. And then I would make a bunch of stuff. And he's like, okay, now give me more of that, but a little more like this. And so I would just make them basically a toolbox of stuff. And I did a whole series on shark fishing. I did a whole thing on a race across the Moroccan desert, a foot race. I did a whole couple of shows on the Iowa wrestling team. And I did a couple of themes for him. And what was cool was the money was pretty good. And also they didn't buy out the music entirely. So I owned all the music. That was the deal. They didn't pay. This is beyond what most people are interested in, but they didn't pay ongoing royalties. They just paid you a fee, but they didn't own the music. So essentially, I kept working for Al and then a couple of other side projects, and I just built up this catalog of music next to my own work. And it's there's similarities. Sometimes I use the war guitar. Sometimes I didn't. Sometimes I would take. I usually, but it's not usually material that I would say, oh, here's my artistic output. It was functional music. It's good, but it was functional. I seem to have a real good niche about making stuff that dialogue can fit over. I think it's because, which kind of led to one of the strategies that we used in Quotia, but which is basically to do this kind of scoring, the music has to be missing. It can't have everything in it. It has to be missing elements that make it actually a complete piece of music. And that's where the imagery and the story go. So I really liked doing it. And I always took it as a challenge. It's like, I want to explore doing these kind of chord changes. Or one of them was, and there's a really interesting professional connection, which I'll tell you in a second. One of them was a documentary about an Irish boxer. And I've always wanted to have a harmonium. And I thought, I'm going to buy a harmonium with the money and use it like an accordion or a harmonica or something. So I would do stuff like that for each project. I would take on something, a new kind of sample library or a new way of arranging or whatever. And that always worked. And that kind of petered out. And what I found out, actually, what I found out with this Irish thing might have been the last one I did, the Irish boxer. ESPN is owned by Disney, I think. And so we were making, it's kind of brilliant when you think about it, but pretty capitalist. we were making this I think it was a two-part 1 hour each documentary about this Irish boxer. The whole purpose of this thing, it served two purposes for ESPN, which was, it was the story of the guy who was in the movie Cinderella Man. I think that might have been Russell Crowe, or like big Disney movie about this Irish boxer, which was coming out, in 9 months. And so this whole thing on ESPN was basically an advertisement for that movie. And then, some of that trickled down on me. And then what I found out later was that maybe it wasn't I was doing the shark fishing thing, which was pretty absurd, but I learned pretty well. It's funny, I made a bunch of stuff, and I actually got Pat to play on some of the shark fishing because I thought, let's do some really thrashy stuff. And then when I finally saw it with the video, I was like, holy shit, you can't have thrashy cymbals on top of thrashy ocean sounds. It doesn't work. It's like everybody's filling up the mid-range. So I kind of had to rethink that. But what it turned out was that this whole documentary thing on ESPN was basically so the president, and I guess I wouldn't say this professionally if I was still doing this kind of stuff, but basically the president of ESPN wanted to have something on the network that would let him go to the award ceremonies, because sports doesn't do that. So they would make these documentaries, and then he could enter them in, and he could go to the Golden Globes or whatever it was. I don't think they ever won anything, but it was like his ticket to be part of like Sirius TV.
Makes total sense.
So I have this. So that's kind of my licensing back, is like I have this gigs and gigs of this stuff, and eventually I made some. I think it was because I scored this Russian film with Pavel, which the English translation was Dead Daughters, and I wanted to do. It was a kind of a thriller, it was a horror film basically, and I wanted to do, for some reason, I wanted to do like, have you ever seen this movie Crash, but not the LA Crash, but the David Cronenberg Crash?
Yeah.
Okay, so Cronenberg always used
Michael Nyman.
No, it's the guy who did the guy who did Lord of the Rings, Howard
Shore.
Say it again.
Or Shore.
Yeah, Howard Shore. So Howard Shore scores Cronenberg's films. And on this film, on Crash, there's a lot of electric guitar, but clean electric guitar and really dissonant stuff. You probably won't remember it, but it's, if you go online and check it out, it's really strange. It's kind of like, I don't know who, Howard wrote it, but it's almost like clean versions of Glenn Branca kind of stuff. And so I thought, I don't know why, I thought I'll do that for this Russian film. So I set up some recording in a warehouse, and that didn't quite work, but I had these really kind of more dissonant kind of clean sounds. And I like some of those so much that I thought, well, I do actually want to release those. And that's kind of led me to this record. I put out Music for Pictures that took a lot of this scoring stuff and actually kind of assembled it in a more music way. And I don't even know how successful the record is artistically, because the pieces are all very short, but that's kind of what I wanted to do, was put some of that there. So yeah, there's that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So before that, you had put out the Untune the Sky compilation, right? That was probably 2003 or something.
Yeah.
And then, so your next outing after Quodia was Music for Pictures. I'm pretty sure.
You know better than
but
me. You know better than me. Yeah.
And then already there's the normalizer thing.
Yeah, I was going to say
modulator, or what did you call it?
I called mine Modulator, which was
Yeah.
the Marco Minimums project, which came out of this working with Eddie Jobson and Marco and Marco. You didn't know Marco at the time. Otherwise, you probably would have been asked. You could still make one, Marcus.
No, I don't want to.
Yeah, yeah,
Not
that's
not not
exactly.
not at this point, but I found the idea great. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
it's interesting. Marco is German, right? So he had this band called Illegal Aliens in Germany, which was his project with Fabio, which is like one of my best friends, bass player and producer. So like I have been like kind of like associated with Marco, but never really had much personal contact.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the Modulator project was crazy. Your response is exactly what I said when Marco asked me at one of Eddie's rehearsals. He said he's got this project. I've got this project, and I'm playing a solo drums, and maybe you would like to be one of the guys who makes a full record on top of my 51-minute drum solo. And I was like, man, I don't want to do that. Don't ask me to do that. And then he said, well, okay, but I'll just send it to you anyway. Alex is doing one, Alex Makachek, and Mike Keneally's doing one. I was like, okay, that makes me actually not want to do it even more, because I'm sure those guys are totally rocking it. Mm-hmm. So we went away, and like 6 months later, he's like, think about this project again. And I was like, I just finished my version, and I'm like playing tablas and scatting, and it's like tablas and scatting. And it's like Mike did his, he did it in like 10 days. And Alex is working on his, and then there's these other guys. I was like, all right, fuck. Give me the files. And so I brought them home, and I really didn't want to do it. I think I said no to him twice, and then he finally just mailed it to me, and he gave me the files, and I put it was 8 tracks of drums, 8 mics, but a single performance. It's his warm up every morning he plays, and he just recorded it once. And I put the files up, and I looked at them, like 51 minutes of solid drumming on 8 tracks. And I just looked at it, and I was like, nah. And I closed the session. And I was like, no, I can't do this. And then he sent me a piece of Alex's, the first piece of Alex, and he sent me a piece of his version. I don't think he sent me any of Keneally's, but when I listened to his, I was like, this is crazy. This is not even, I just pictured like these heavy fusion guys with massive chops, like, not dweedling, but just really nailing this shit. And Marco's it was like bathroom humor with silly voices and, I don't know, penny whistles and tablas. Like, okay, that's not what I was expecting. And then Alex's was beautiful. And I thought, okay, well, look, I can't do what these guys do at all. But maybe let's see what happens if I just do what I do. Marco didn't even seem to care what, like, you just try it. So I worked on the first 3 minutes, and I did the absolute opposite of what Alex or Keneally did. And I really enjoyed it. And it was kind of, and I sent it to Marco, and he's like, great, do it. So I was like, okay, I guess I'm in. But then, and I got in, so I would pick different sections to work on that seemed like, oh, I can figure out what to do here. It was in a way, one of the most challenging things I've ever done. And it went on for 2 years. It went on for 2 fucking years. And basically what would happen was that, first of all, Marco didn't play this as a concept of like, I'm going to make a bed for other musicians to make an entire record. Like, I think at this point there were 7 different records made on top of this drum solo. He just played his drum solo. And so it's our job to figure out, like, how the fuck do you make it work on top of this drum solo? So there were definitely parts. It was like, I'll get to that part later, and it wasn't formless. It was a form that he had like kind of a map that he improvises through. Mm-hmm. And so I would work on different sections, and the ending was great, and this section was great, and here's there. And so I slowly was sewing it together. The biggest challenge was you would have two ideas, and there maybe would be a 1 minute place where your ideas didn't connect, what Marco played through. Now you figure out how to sew them together. And oftentimes you would sew them together and now it's not working. So this is where I really felt like I was getting into what writers do, where they write a story and then they have to rewrite it and rewrite it. I feel like musicians don't do that. They don't rewrite. Like if it's not working, you just write something new. And here, like I had to figure out, okay, do I kill this idea over here and bring this one over, or do I bring this one back? Or sometimes I would just kill a little bit of both and put a new section in. And the idea was the only kind of rule was that you don't edit the drums. I did do a little fiddly knit bit with, like, I would process parts of the drums, but there was no cutting, you know.
Yeah.
And what eventually happened, so there was this constant challenge of like, I got to get something up in this section. And then I'll put something else, and then I'll see, well, the first thing isn't working. So I take that away, and then I bring this idea in. And there was that, like, and then the sewing together ideas. Alex Makachek's was 24 tracks. I don't remember how many mine was. It was over 20, but, you know, individual pieces. But the real challenge was, once you've gone through all the parts that make sense to you, now you're left with 3 parts that you cannot figure out what to do. And so, like, the out of the 2 years, the first 18 months got me through like 90% of the record. And then the last 6 months was spent on probably 5 or 6 minutes of drumming. And eventually, Alex Makachek and I would have, we would have like therapy sessions together on the phone. Like, what do we do in this section? Like, I was like, what is Marco doing? It's like, oh, he's playing like, I can track the cymbals, but like the kick drum, or I can track the kick drum. I was like, okay. Alex is like, no, I got it figured out. And we would beat time. You know, we would, what do you call it? Beat map. I would beat map it. So sometimes I was using MIDI, but also just to try to make sense out of this stream of drumming. And eventually we found the section where the worst section, the hardest section to deal with, was where Marco's playing in 9/8, this 9/8 kick drum pattern. And Marco does these 15/16 things, or 9/16, where it's like 1, 2, da, da, do, dee, da, 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 and the beat starts again. It's not this kind of Crimson style of rock rhythm, where the odd time signatures, there's still this pulse underneath that you can. Marco's like,
he does the skipping.
Yeah, I'll skip it. Well, not only was he doing that, but in this section, he's playing in 9/8 with a kick drum. And then the cymbals come in on top in 9. Then they go to 8/9, then 7/9, and then 6, and then back the other way. So and it's just filled with drumming. And it took me months to figure out what to do. And I eventually felt like I found a good solution. So I think it's an interesting record. It's really challenging to listen to. It's not, I mean, I challenge anyone to sit down and listen to the whole thing. It's and not just mine, and then, you know, one of the things that I tried to do, I tried to make us a compilation record where I got all the bits of everybody else's record and then tried to edit them together into not all of it, but like all the juicy bits, and edit together into a single record. And that ended up failing. I can't remember if it just wasn't successful or if we lost ambition. I should look at it again. But the coolest thing about the whole project is to listen to just the first 3 minutes and like the last 6 minutes of everybody's record, and hear what they did with the same drum. And that's really cool. Yeah. So I was really happy I did it. I was really happy I got done with it. I'm happy it's there.
You know, there's a couple of things I want to say. So first of all, I think that this kind of approach to kind of like solve a puzzle, right, is the best composition class you can take.
Yeah.
Problem solving, puzzle solving, and
Yeah, because you can't undo. You're stuck with some things, and you've got to adapt and
Yeah.
in juicy ways.
And it's interesting because you said like in musicians usually don't don't rewrite but write something new, right? For me the rewriting is the challenge actually. Like I want to, like if there is a problem, I want to solve it with the material that's there. I don't want to take something out,
Go,
right?
go
So
somewhere.
I may want to add, maybe I need to add something to solve the problem, and I'm okay with that. But usually I don't want to take anything away from the material that I generated, right? So um, I found the idea, and also like back then it was like publicized this project, right? The Normalizer project, and I thought it was a great thing, and I in an ideal world I would have loved to tackle it just because of the challenge. And this is kind of like the second thing I wanted to say. So like the theme that now kind of like comes through a little bit, which really didn't really kind of like show its face in the first few conversations we had, right? Is this aspect of that you do like to be challenged, and you do even create these situations in which you challenge yourself. Like the example you say, you buy an instrument, right?
Yeah,
You buy a new piece of software. You know,
you're forced to go
yeah,
for it with something's unknown or uncomfortable.
yeah. That's really what that we have that in common for sure. That's yeah. It's interesting because like if you like I paid very close attention to what you were saying, like in our series here of conversations, and it really, this aspect really has only kind of like appeared after the Crimson years, like when you start talking about Quodia, and
Talking about it, sure, but
yeah,
also if you remember, I was doing a similar thing on the 4-track cassettes as a kid.
yes,
You know,
yeah, I do know. It's just yes,
and
and I mean,
go ahead.
no, I just wanted to say that it's sort of like interesting because, as you said, like you were like 42 and like entering this new phase, and with your child, and you've got the house, and so even though like the on the surface or like on the outside, things really did change quite a bit for you, right? And you went from like touring regularly to touring much less, and shorter periods of time that you were away from home. But there, like this core theme of looking for challenges, right? Kind of remained and stayed there. And like we haven't talked about your interest um, uh, in sports, right?
Well,
Yet.
and I was just thinking about that because I've been pondering it actually just since last night. I've been pondering it again. I was like, why? Last night, short story. I started doing Aikido right when I moved in this house too, and I think that connects to that time period.
Mhm.
But now I'm practicing Jiu-Jitsu, and last night I was um, rolling with these two guys. One of them's 38, and the other's maybe 30 in his late
Mhm.
20s, and um, I just turned 60. And they're totally kicking my ass. I mean, I'm holding my own to a certain degree, but they're also kicking my ass. And when I got home last night, I was thinking, what a strange thing. Like,
Mhm.
I don't mind getting my ass kicked. Like I know I'm putting myself in a challenging situation, and part of the challenge, I was kind of half thinking that, and the other half is the way you get good at it. This thing is to put yourself in an awkward situation. And I'm talking about like technically, like if you want to get good at defending your arm being broken, and I'm being exaggerating a little bit. Yeah, it can get broken, but you tap
Mhm.
out. But a
Mhm.
specific thing, or let's say a triangle choke, which is where you're getting choked here. If you want to get good at that, defending that and not getting caught in that, you have to put yourself in that situation. So you either start there or you decide, oh, you know, it's like going on stage with 5 strings instead of 6 strings.
Mm-hmm.
You know, or let's say I'm not going to use any delays tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Or what happened to me at one of the shows that you saw. Well, you saw the show where my looping device didn't work, but I had another one where I was playing the piece, and I don't think you were there.
No, I was there.
I was playing a piece, and like I was supposed to go. It was time for the solo, and I had this great like fuzzed, super sustained sound, and I went for it, and it was like blink, totally clean. And I couldn't, there was no way I could fiddle in the moment. So I was like, well, fuck, I'm just going to have to play the solo with a banjo sound now. It's a little bit like that. And the thing I was wrestling with last night thinking about this was, am I really putting myself here because I'm trying to develop a new skill, or I just like being in situations where you're about to fail at any moment? You know what I mean? Like, okay, it is teaching you skills, and you know, you don't at this point, I'm pretty sure I can say you don't learn by being successful. You actually learn by failing at something and then processing it. Like if you're always good at drawing, you're not gonna, you know, or if everybody tells you you're the best bass player, you don't, you know, but if you put yourself in a situation where having to play with a drummer who's doing something weird, you know. So it's an odd thing. I'm still, maybe in 15, maybe you can figure it out, or in 15 years I'll know. It's something about just being used to being challenged and wanting to be, not being afraid of failing at it, you know.
Yeah. It's you know, that at some point I was, well, no, let me just ask you something else before. In your family, has there been like a theme of competitiveness?
Not, I wouldn't say so. Although both my parents were very successful at what they did. My father as a businessman, and he took some radical jumps in his business, like doing things outside of the norm.
Mm-hmm.
My mother's was well, she's retired now, but academic, and did some crazy ass shit. She studied, I know we're not talking about my mother, but she studied women's education, and she did her doctoral thesis. She went to Northern Ireland and Palestine and interviewed women in the militarized states about how they passed on things. And she would go with the Catholic nuns and sneak under the border from Israel to Palestine and interview Arab women. So that's pretty over the top. Not competitive, but just kind of that kind of confidence that you need to go on stage and feel like you know what you're doing, even though you don't. You know what I mean?
You know, like, I mean, it's just like you had like role models in your parents, like people who were successful or pushing forward, you know, in a way. Yeah. Right. And so yeah.
But
Yeah,
not
interesting,
competitive.
because
I never felt competitive like somebody's got to win, you know, somebody's got to be on top, not that kind of a thing.
yeah. How was your relationship with Kimmo in this regard?
Chemo is like a weird kind of, I never had I didn't grow up with a brother. I
Mhm.
had a sister who was much younger than me when I was a kid. So chemo is like what I imagine that would be like, although probably a better version of it.
Mhm.
Musically, not competitive at all. It's like the thing is about, I feel like about Texans is that we grew up with this sense of there's this trickster element like in our, I feel like in our blood, or at least that's how it was with my family, and that's how I feel kind of at my. I have to reel this back in, like the way Texans are affectionate is they tease the fuck out of each other basically, but also practical jokes and so that just totally goes with chemo right away. Like I think the first, we had met, we had rehearsed, and then we went home, and like the first tour, we were going to meet up at the Copenhagen airport, and I got there early. I didn't know him that well, but I knew, enough, and there was enough. And the first thing that happened was he snuck up behind me and stole my laptop bag and hid it in the airport, Copenhagen. And then he came and said hello, and I couldn't find my bag, and that's like how we begin. And so there was always this playful. The funny thing about chemo, and I was thinking about it the other day too, because he worked with the Kronos Quartet, and I was like, oh, that's awesome. He's like, yeah, we recorded. And the first thing he said about the Kronos Quartet is they're not very fun. The cellist, he's fun. He likes to have a good time, but the other guys, they just want to play music.
I see.
So that's a little, the thing that with about chemo is that in a way with chemo, I kind of met somebody who will go further than I could ever go. Like in terms of teasing or playing a joke or something on somebody. And actually, interesting enough, chemo is the only guy that I've ever used Aikido on in real life. And it wasn't even very much. I was like, okay, this does work. And it wasn't because he was just drunk and getting a little too aggressive. And I just grabbed his hand and held it in a certain way. And he was like, oh shit, now I can't go anywhere. I was like, yeah, exactly. Calm yourself down. I think that, I guess if I had to analyze it, that kind of playfulness also goes with this, give yourself a challenge. It's similar. It's like the way through it. Don't you think? Like you have to be able to, this like serious play, you have to be able to like step back from the problem and find a way of looking at it that's not a normal, that's like more holistic and not normal, and go down that strange path. And I think that's really similar to the sense of play, whether it's just between people or as musical. If you're just going to do the normal thing, it usually doesn't work in those puzzle situations. It's going to be the wrong thing. You gotta find a way in. So
yeah, exactly. And that's why designing puzzles for yourself is probably it's like this is something that's come up in my teaching and coaching activities, is like, how can people really become great artists rather than performers or just technical players or composers, right? Like you basically want to design your own curriculum, your own tools. You want to like every single element of what you use in order to practice, right? Ideally it's something that you designed yourself, right? That you created yourself. And I see that as like a commonality between you and I somehow, that there's like this idea, okay, so yeah, I've got this new project, but in order to make it interesting for me, I need to impose an restriction on myself, so it's interesting, and
and forces you to go somewhere you wouldn't normally go, right? And I think that's what's cool, because you find your way, and you find your vocabulary even in ways that you wouldn't normally speak. It's still in there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, for me, it was like literally only practicing chromatic stuff for like the first let me think, almost 20 years of my career practicing my instrument. Crazy, but it kind of like that was just my thing, and that's why I probably I do what I do, because I did that. You know, so the Aikido, as you mentioned, and the Jiu-Jitsu, and that sort of like had like really became a much bigger thing in your life than you probably expected, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I wasn't planning on that. The keto came kind of from two directions. One, I wanted, it was recommended to me because I was having so much trouble from playing the instrument and,
Mhm.
and traveling and carrying the suitcases around the world, and then playing the instrument and the stress um, in the elbow and the wrist and probably the shoulders, but immediately, like just the pain, and an acupuncturist said, you know, you might go down and meet Bruce Bookman and do some Aikido. I was like, that's a weird thing, but the dojo's just down the street. And then with my child, I thought, I want something. Wouldn't it be cool if there was something that we could do together that was like that? So, um, and it would be good. So we went down and watched Bruce, like teaching Aikido to the kids. It was amazing. It was the opposite of uh, you know, we have the stereotype here in the Northwest, which is a true stereotype of like extra sensitive and extra caring and extra careful and don't offend, and you know, and the first class I just went to watch Bruce Bookman with the kids, he kicked 3 boys off the mat. And I was like, and all the mothers are sitting there and they're like, oh shit, my kid just got kicked off the mat. And Bruce took them to the side and he said, okay, so we've talked about this before. You guys are off the mat for the day. You don't go home. You sit there and watch us. Next time you come back, I want you to really think about whether you want to be here or not. Just because your dad wants you to be here, that's not good enough. And I was like, holy shit, I just fell in love with this guy. Like that's the opposite of, and so anyway, I watched for, and I watched for like 6 months while my kid was doing the class, and Melissa, who you also met when you were in there, she's a ex New York City ballerina who teaches Aikido. You know, I was watching the stuff they're doing to the wrists, and I was like, oh my God, I can't. And she's like, no, you got to come onto the mat. You say when to stop, you know. And so I started practicing, and man, within 6 months, my limbs felt totally different. And I just fell in love with the practice. And Bruce is a very high level, world class guy from New York, and I think he was the youngest black belt given out at a super high level dojo in New York City. And so I practiced up through my black belt there. And you know, a little bit because I brought some of the touch guitarists into the dojo, and we experimented with that. And then I got into Jiu-Jitsu because Bruce is also a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I fell in love with that. And that's pretty much all I do now. And it's so consuming to learn these things, you know, with Aikido, to the amount of falling that you take and dealing with your body and being challenged. It just it probably filled out like stuff that I was doing as a musician that I didn't have to do anymore. Like it actually probably freed up my need to be challenged. I feel like that's how it is now. Like I'm able to have that kind of challenge over here that's super physical, and then the music kind of, there's not so much pressure on being a musician because I'm you know what I mean? Because some of that working on it there, and the physical challenge and all of that. And then with jiu-jitsu, you're actually really fighting, and it's super technical and also completely improvised. I mean, that's what's so cool. That's what's so cool about jiu-jitsu. It's just one-on-one, and everyone's body is different, and everyone's strategy and how they use their body is different. So every time you're with somebody, it's a totally new improvisation. Yeah, I love it. And I kind of wrestle with, now, you know, I wrestle with how much time or energy to put into it. Like when I don't do jujitsu for a week, I get so much more music done, but then I start to feel twitchy, you know, my body kind of gets depressed if I'm not going there.
How often do you go?
Like 5 times a week.
And that is, you kind of have to do that, or would 3 times a week work for you?
2 times is not enough, because it hurts more. Like you're more sore. Like you don't ever get not sore most of the time, but you get to like somewhere, you get into a plane where it's enough, you're moving your body enough and it's being challenged enough that you get comfortable. And then there's a little like too much, and that too much is really depends on how old you are. I think, you know, I can do a lot. I can actually do quite a bit, but the recovery time, you know, and it's not like boxing or something like that, but just the movement and being squished by guys, and if you don't actually get injured. And I've been lucky not being injured in jiu-jitsu. I've gotten injured with Aikido quite a bit. Or at least a few times, but yeah, and now I was able to, during the quarantine, one of the guys I had been working with at one of the schools, he didn't want to be around anybody, and we kind of vetted each other for how we were social distancing, and we kind of decided we could work together. So we've been working in his garage last year, and it's been great. It's been really interesting. Actually, you'll find this interesting because because of how music is taught and learned, it's just what we were talking about. You know, normally with these martial arts, you go to a class and there's an advanced person teaching, and they show you moves and you practice them, and then they critique you, and they're leading a curriculum, right? And I've been doing this for many years and learning stuff. It's great. When the quarantine hit and Mike and I are left to our own devices, like we can do anything. Well, now we have to decide that it's probably not as broad a sport as music is broad, but it's still pretty broad. Like there's all these different ways you can go. And when you get more advanced, people specialize in within the practice of like, these are the kind of moves that I like to do, and these are the kind of things that work against you. So we were left to our own devices, and now we had to make our own curriculum and based on what we wanted to work on. So we were now responsible for our own game. I don't know if that would ever happen if you're just going to class all the time. You know what I mean? Like you're just following along and you're getting good, but having to be forced to make your own game. It's pretty interesting. So yeah,
exactly. You know, that's one of the things that I've tried to incorporate into my teaching, is to sort of like have this fuzziness in how I present stuff, so that people have a chance to find their own version, at least, of, right? So it's that's
yeah, and you're probably a little bit better. I have when I'm coaching with people, I do a similar, but I may even be like 2 hands off. Like if somebody doesn't know what they want to do, I feel like I can't even help them at all. I don't even know, like I don't feel even comfortable like giving somebody a curriculum.
Hey, let me give you an example for something that actually may help you, right? So when I started with the stick, right, and I picked it up and felt so horrible, and we talked about that, right? So it was clear to me that I would have to start from somewhere. I couldn't just say I don't know how, like, okay. So then I said, okay, I need to take something that is not the instrument, but that is music, and say, okay, what does music require of me, right? Okay, I want to start the note, I want to end the note. And that was the beginning of everything. Like, so I didn't have to know. I just had to kind of like decide for myself, okay, there's these two things that I simply claim that I know that they're important, right? And then you build on top of something that you basically decide that something is true. You can't prove that it's true, but you just say this is true, and from that truth, you kind of like build everything, right? And that sort of is the way that I approach these.
Meaning you decided what you think is what you decide what's valuable, and now you're going to build on that.
Yes, and that's how I deal with this in coaching situations where, like, if like somebody doesn't have any idea what they want to do, and I don't have any idea, I simply improvise a truth. I improvise and I find one thing that I say, right? And then this one little thing that just is kind of like the trigger, or you could say like the foundation of not, of starting the research, let's say, right? And then the research will modify the truth, right? So it's not that having an opinion at the beginning leads you, it it's interesting because I have some associations here about like what we experienced in the tapping world a little bit, but like it's possible to change something, while you research, right? And so if you just have this axiom at the beginning, like you say, okay, 1 + 1 is 2, right? And that's where you start your research. And then at some point you may come to a conclusion, yeah, but if we do this and that, then maybe 1 + 1 is whatever, right? And so this is kind of what I try to do with coaching, in a coaching situation as well. So simply start from an improvised truth. Right? And
I mean, you have to get movement going, otherwise everybody should just go home.
yeah, exactly. And the interesting thing is that you can get the movement going even from not saying anything, right? Or you could not finish your sentences, right? You can kind of like make people fill in the gaps like somehow, and then you take that and like I said, as a foundation for research, as a starting point for research.
Right.
And I was actually thinking because like there's sort of like a crossover between, obviously, like coaching is not therapy, but like
some of the similar tools.
yeah, and like the wrestling, let's say, like the close contact, I believe, in my world, for myself, it has a lot to do with like the process of protecting your inner child, or of re-experiencing, or like recreating situations of physical contact, which basically, you could say that's touch, but no, it's more than touch. It's actually pressure. It's like feeling yourself, right? It's really the interaction with the physical world, with animate objects, not just with like a glass of water or something.
Right? You get a sense of your own being able to give pressure, and because it's not a chair, you're working towards getting immediate feedback of what am I doing here, and and even fundamental. I mean, there's the two big fundamentals is gravity, which actually is one of the things that's kind of radicalized my approach to the instrument being on my lap.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
saved my hands. And Bruce Bookman also, I remember the first time he said this, I've heard him only say it twice, but the first time he said it, like some penny dropped for me. And he was describing this sense of being able to defend yourself as like a super high virtue, in a sense, like in the same sense of, and he might have even used this example, I can't remember, of like a worm,
Mhm.
like a worm being able to wriggle away from something. Like you're able to, you're kind of striving to access at that level. It's not all these other things that we build, but it's actually like life taking care of itself, and protecting itself. And that's pretty freaking core. And we're not talking, shootouts or anything, but just like how, I don't know, the same thing. There's no difference between us and a worm.
Yeah. Yeah. And well, there's a difference. There's a difference that like as human beings, we have found ways to get cultured rather than natured, right?
Yeah.
So that means that we also have means to remove ourselves from our natural um, ways to, like, maybe nowadays you don't really have to face as many fights as you needed to face like 150 years ago, even like in Texas, right? So
And
and like
it's not even that you are going to be defending yourself. It's just the sense that you could, that you're engaging with that capacity. I think that's what's really cool about it.
yeah, I've had an interesting experience, maybe just like a couple or 3 weeks ago. There was a bank holiday here, and like in a uh, in Germany, and mostly Catholic, right? Like, and it was Easter Monday actually, and there was a guy at the apartment door, um, and he claimed to be, he was basically he was asking for money, right? But he was claiming that he comes from like an organization of um, um, ambulance drivers or something like that, and he had like his full thing on, like the uniform, and I at first I was shocked, like, I mean, something wrong, like somebody needs help in the house, or and it was, like I said, it was a bank holiday in Germany. It's really a holy thing, a bank holiday. You don't ring somebody's doorbell, right, when it's a bank holiday. And so what happens is that I said, he can just briefly showed me like his little card, like, and then he said, asked me if I wanted to sign on this list, for donations, doing donations and something like that. And I said no. And I said to him, it feels strange that you're here. It's a bank holiday, and I don't see how a Christian organization would actually send somebody out to do that kind of thing on a holy day, like really the most holy day in the in the calendar for those people, right? So then he just didn't want to go, and it was amazing. Like, I really started shouting at that guy when he kind of like started arguing. I said, like, you need to leave the house. I don't even know how you came into the house, right?
Mm.
Like, if you want to talk to me, you need to ring the house bell, not my apartment doorbell. I said that to him, and I said, like, please leave, right? And he was arguing, and I started shouting at him at some point, like, he said, leave. And I've never, in a long time, I've never like done something like that. And it was kind of incredible to experience this power again, where it was like, I can tell this guy, even if I feel bad afterwards, but I have the means to give him a sign
Mhm.
that I don't want him here, right?
Mhm.
And and this is interesting, and that reminded me of my time in my 20s, probably, or early 20s, when I'm starting to realize that like the human, the range of human behavior is super wide, but like what we use, like in you know, Western cultures, right, it's just such a small part of it. So why are we capable of aggression? Why are we capable of shouting? Why does our voice even allow that we shout and stuff like that, you know? And then I realized that yes, there are situations where aggression actually is justified. There are situations where even, or especially physical, and you know, this coming back to what you were saying, like physical interaction with another human being is something that is actually required, where
Right.
you have to have this fight. It's not everything is about being rational or about talking it out. No, they're like, because like we kind of like meet these other people, and somehow what we always believe is that the other person or the other human being is just like myself, you know, just like
Right.
ourselves. And I think that's like the biggest mistake like that we tend to make, is not to see that there are actually quite a lot of, there can be quite big differences between these beings called human beings, right? And that's where like the outer parts, right, of the human expression kind of comes into play. Because like with a certain kind of being, you have to be a little bit more physical, like maybe even what, you know, you and Kimmo, I don't know, you know, maybe, you know, with Pat you wouldn't be like that, you know, but Kimmo you would be like that. And then and so I think the ability to kind of like recognize and understand what kind of interaction is appropriate is sort of like something that we need to cultivate more, as in maybe become more natural again, or that kind of thing. And this is where I see, this is kind of like what I if there's anything that I learned from meeting Bruce, you know, that was kind of like the vibe I got. Like he says, like we're doing this here, and it is part of what we are as human beings, and there's nothing here that is special even,
Right. It's not,
right?
it's, yeah, yeah, yeah. And you know, what you're talking about, or how I hear it at least, is this idea of blending. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
mean it doesn't mean being peaceful all the time.
Yeah.
That's not going to blend with certain things. You know,
Yes.
you and when you're blending with someone, and we can make the analogy musically easily, but let's not for a second. When you're blending with someone, um, they you're tuning into them, which lets them tune into you, which means there there's like a level of respect that comes, and then you can diffuse that in itself starts to diffuse the situation, or can, you know. And
Yeah. So,
for me, that's how Aikido was for a long time for me, and why it felt so musical, because you're learning to the kind of martial art it is that you're learning to blend with somebody else's movement and then turn that against them. That's kind of the extreme version, but and that's this fighting thing we don't really do as musicians. That you try to get on top, and when people do that to you, you don't really want to play with them. But the sense of blending, you know, both sound wise and rhythmic wise and phrasing wise, it's, you know, that's what we do.
yeah. However, I think that there like a certain amount of aggression, like even in musical improvisation, let's say, is required. It's like,
Yeah.
you know, if we wouldn't, if there's no element like that, then the roles simply stay as they are, right? Like you have the drummer, you have the bass player, you have the rhythm guitars, and you have the lead guitarist, right? Like, and the roles never mix up. But then maybe sometimes the bass player wants to be John Entwistle, and this, and I think it's important, because that way a real dynamic, um, will appear,
Yeah,
emerge.
you definitely have to bring in new ideas, and you don't want status. stasis. You don't want stasis.
Yeah. Yeah.
The
Yeah.
aims are a little different, and I still wrestle with that myself. I made so many connections with the Keto practice and the music practice for the first few years that I started to get a little confused about whether the aims were the same. And I still try to make comparisons and with Jiu-Jitsu, and I often wrestle with, but our aims aren't the same. It's like it's got its own, not just its own rule set, but and then also why people are there is not necessarily the same reason that I'm there.
Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to say. It's like the place that you come from is important, right? So maybe let's say like most of the people in Seattle are compassionate, right?
Mm-hmm.
Both of them, but there are a few that are not, right?
Well, or at least they passion is a virtue that everybody's going towards. There's also a lot of passive aggressiveness under that. But anyway, that's
I know, but this is exactly what I was trying to say. That like like you can't just thrive on this one facet of being, right? You can't just be compassionate all the time. Like if there's somebody who's starting to hit you, right? You can be as compassionate as you want to be. You know, it's not the appropriate response. So you want to like run away, or like you want to do something else, not just be compassionate, right? And in the like the idea of the sociopath or even the psychopath that has been kind of like present, and yeah, if there's a person who doesn't, where there is no chance that that person ever has a feeling of compassion with me, I should, I need to kind of like use a language that that person understands, right? And I think that's also that's, and I think you said that before, that's some sort of respect. Like you're kind of like showing respect by trying to find that language, right?
mm-hmm.
And that could be, like I say, it doesn't always have to be within that small range. It can be slightly off to the side, right?
Stop.
Or yeah, exactly, yeah, yeah.
It can be.
To me, and this is why I was reminded of that when I was shouting at that guy here, right? Like that physical, I felt almost a little bit of shame for having done that afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even though I like even though I think it was the right thing, but it's just outside of the norm, probably.
Also shocking. Sometimes it could, was it shocking that you responded that way for you?
Yeah, it was shocking, but I could feel that it had to do with like this idea of protecting my family somehow.
Yeah.
So like if
somebody who gets that, and you the thing is, you could just put up a little sign, and if they get that, they're backing away. But if they don't get it, now it goes to the next level, right?
Yeah, that's exactly how it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you ever worked with a sociopath musically?
Yes.
And was it similar as inside the music, or is that outside of the?
Believe it or not, I found ways to even work within those restrictions.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. Like I think what happens is that like the results, they are not greater than the sum of the parts. Like it's, but it works. It's okay. I mean, there is a way to even adjust to that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Did you have a situation like that?
Well, I didn't know. I'm a little slow to pick up some of that stuff from people. It takes me a while. So there's been a couple of situations where later on, not even afterwards, but like near the end of their relationship, I realized they were either having a completely, utterly different experience than everyone else on the planet, or there was just a motivation that just did not, I just didn't agree with, or
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where it was coming from. Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I kind of, maybe now that I'm older, but I kind of take that personally. I've kind of taken it personally a few times. Like I need to get away from this person now, and I don't. I guess I didn't at the time really understand why you would be. It's not simple as like why you would be such a dick, but why you would have made like made a whole different uh, false story under everything, and and
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I kind of used to take that kind of thing really personally.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously you take it personally, right? Like for me, it's a little bit the other way around. As I get older, I want to be more forgiving, even to those characters that are uncontrollable, let's say. And I don't mean that I want to control them, but the people that don't have control over themselves, right? And and I've yeah, I think I've been quite horrible with some people where like I think the term that people now use like in the dating scene is like ghosting, right? Like where you simply don't ever talk with somebody, right? And this I did that not quite a few times. I don't know, like 3 or 4 times with people where I completely, because they did something that I did not agree with, and something that hurt me in a big way. And I said, okay, in order to protect myself, I need to like never ever have any contact again. And even recently, just a couple of years ago, I sort of had that reaction to somebody. After a long time, I had that kind of reaction again, and I'm aware of it now, and I'm not proud of myself that I reacted that way. But it's very difficult to kind of like find a way out of that. Like, what is the alternative, right? Like, how do I not expose myself to that same violence again, let's say, right?
Right. Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah. That's
it's
that's tricky. Yeah, I've done that before. I used to actually, when I was younger, I used to kind of do that in a little more lightweight version with musicians I was working with who weren't taking it as seriously as me.
Mhm, mhm.
And I know why I did that. I mean, I know why that happened, but it feels like a little more brutal than it had to be, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
And I've
yeah.
reconciled actually with a few people, and actually with some people, I don't even know. It didn't even come to the surface. I just didn't want to be around them anymore,
Mhm.
And then we got over. I got over that, but
It's funny. There's this young guy that I'm teaching, and I actually um, even asked him to walk away from situations where he's with other musicians that don't, where he knows that they will never
mm,
have the same aims that he has, right?
mm,
Um, also felt a little bad to suggest that, but I think you have to do a little bit of that in order
yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
sort of self-love, to walk away from situations that are not good for yourself, right?
Yeah, I mean that's one of the keys. I think it's one of the big keys that we don't really talk about that much. But like to be a successful musician, one of the most important things is to be able to create situations that work for you.
Yeah.
That forget trying to make a living or even making stuff. Like that's one of the big skills. Like if you can make situations that let you thrive, that's a huge skill. It might even be the first most important skill. I don't know, but it's a it's a big thing. It's it's more important than being able to make money off of a project. The capacity to create that. So, probably good advice.
Again, in a world where compassion is like maybe the number one thing, right? It's even difficult to admit that questions like, okay, like, what do I get out of this situation? Like, what is good? What is in this for me? I'm starting. Well, it's maybe the most fundamental question you kind of like have to ask yourself in order to be a good person somehow, right? Because like, why would you stay in a situation where you don't see a positive outcome for yourself? And the interesting thing is that like there are some situations in my life where I did actually stay, right? And I know exactly what kind of skill, what kind of result I got out of that time that I stayed within a music, playing with a group of people or whatever. Like, even if it's just like I want to release that album with you because I love the music so much, right? That's then you stay and you learn to wait till that's done, right? Yeah, it's fascinating, and yeah, I agree. Like, why, uh, let's start a music school, which is like which is which in I, I don't know how to say this, but it seems like when you're watching YouTube and you're watching like the good music YouTubers, like the people that really know what they're talking about, and they're kind of like spilling all the beans, right? Like all the secrets are on the table, it seems, right? But no, there's so much more, and I find that it would be very interesting to have some sort of way to pass that knowledge on to people, rather than how to play an A minor chord or
Speaking of wisdom, I was thinking what you were saying just a second ago reminded me of Robert telling me, I think it was Michael Giles. I think he said Michael Giles said that the formula for keeping a band together is music, the people, or the money. All you have to have is two of the three. Any two of the three. But if you only have one, it's close to going away. Wow, that's cool. If you hate the people and there's no money, but you love the music, it's not going to last very long. That's probably the best one of the. Well, some people, it's social, right? But if you don't like the music, but if you get two of those, you might be able to stay together.
Yes, yeah. Okay, man.
Yeah.
So what do we do now?
I don't know. I feel like we have one more.
Yeah.
Don't you? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Do another one. What the hell?
Hey, so let me stop the recording and we'll
Yeah.
we'll
Yeah.
okay.